It's 3 a.m. in a medieval castle, and the fire just went out. Stone breathes cold around you. Your breath hangs like mist in the air. The walls that kept invaders away now trap the night itself inside. Tonight we are not here for battles or kings. We are here for something quieter. The old human ritual of trying to sleep when the world was frozen. Picture the castle from afar, a monolith of grey limestone crowned by snow. No street lamps, no chimney smoke beyond its own. Inside, the corridors breathe like caves. The temperature lingers just above freezing, even when the hearths roar. In the daylight, courtiers laugh and feast. At night, those same rooms become haunted by their own silence. The draught sneaks through every keyhole and arrow loop. Tapestries sway slightly, though no one moves. To live in a castle was to announce you were untouchable. To sleep in one was to discover how wrong that was. Castles were built for war, not warmth. Thick walls absorbed the sun by day but bled that heat to the wind by night. Stone retains the memory of winter long after spring arrives. In the great hall, a fire the size of a wagon burned constantly. Not for comfort, but for symbolism. It told visitors the Lord was awake, alive, and wealthy enough to waste wood. But up in the said chambers, far from that central blaze, warmth was a fragile guest. Chimneys were rare in early centuries. Smoke escaped through holes in the roof or between beams. When it snowed, ash and ice fell in the same breath. Servants rushed through corridors carrying buckets of glowing coals, each a tiny sun wrapped in iron. They poured them into braziers, metal bowls that hissed like small dragons. The heat barely touched the air but gave the illusion of safety. So they learned to build fortresses within fortresses. The bed itself became a castle. Massive oak frames carved with saints or heraldic beasts stood on raised platforms. Heavy curtains of wool or velvet draped from every side, creating a tent inside the room. When drawn tight, those curtains trapped body heat, like the walls of a modern sleeping bag. Inside, the air was thick with breath and the smell of lanolin and tallow. The lord and lady slept beneath blankets stuffed with goose feathers, their weight like armour. A servant might sleep curled on the floor near the door, both guardian and human heater. Some beds were so large that children, pets, and occasional guests shared them all winter. Warmth was communal, and privacy a summer luxury. The material world of the Middle Ages was made for cold. Every fibre spoke the language of insulation. Wool tunics, fur-lined cloaks, hose wound twice round the legs. Even the poorest owned a blanket woven from sheep that had grown up under frost. They warmed stones in the hearth and wrapped them in cloth to place at their feet. The medieval version of a hot water bottle. In some manor records you find entries for bed dogs. Small boxes of glowing coals slid beneath the mattress to heat the straw. It often scorched the bedding, sometimes the sleeper. Still, they used them. Sleep was worth the risk. Religion filled the gaps that science could not. To endure cold was to imitate the saints. Monks wrote that frost cleansed the soul as fire purified metal. So before lying down they crossed themselves, thank God for the blanket on their body and the breath in their lungs, and offered the cold as a silent penance. When you believe suffering has meaning, you sleep a little easier. Bells toll distantly. Compline hour. As the sound fades, the castle descends into its true nature, a sleeping fortress, dreaming of summer. Every human in a castle carried a tiny hearth inside their chest. They learned to protect it with ritual precision. Before night fell, servants closed shutters with slabs of oak, wedging rags into the cracks. They hung heavy wall tapestries, woven scenes of saints and huntsmen, not only for beauty but to muzzle the draught. A lady of the household might pace the hall before bed, warming her blood. Men stomped their boots beside the brazier, the leather stiff with frost. Then came layers, linen, then wool, then fur, each trapping breath against skin. To undress for sleep was folly. Many slept fully clothed, a small hood pulled low so that only the nose peeped into the cold. Married couples shared one truth all chroniclers agree on: 2 bodies are better than 1 fire. Lie close, a 14th century medical text advised, for heat falleth soon from him that sleepeth alone. Heat followed rank. The great hall's hearth belonged to the lord, but its embers warmed the hierarchy beneath him. Closest to the blaze sat nobles and favoured guests. Farther out, servants. At the edges, guards and dogs. By night, the pattern repeated in miniature within chambers. Even in sleep, society had its circles of warmth. When the fire died, its smoke became a second blanket. Soot clung to rafters, thick as fur. A castle might smell of oak and ash year-round, evidence of 1,000 half-successful nights. Yet there was something comforting in that scent. It said, "You've done this before. You survived last winter. You'll survive this one." Somewhere below, a sleepy boy made his nightly patrol. He carried an iron pan filled with embers, swinging it like a lantern. One by one he stirred the braziers, checked that curtains hadn't caught fire, and whispered apologies to half-awake guards. In return he earned a corner of the kitchen to sleep in, a kingdom of warmth no noble could rival. Ovens stayed warm long after the last bread was pulled, and the floor itself radiated the day's labour. Many a cook's apprentice dreamed beside a dying loaf, wrapped in the smell of yeast and safety. Beds were feats of medieval engineering. A mattress was no soft cloud, but a tick stuffed with straw, feathers if you were lucky. It was changed twice a year, the straw burned to drive out fleas. On top lay quilts of layered wool, stitched heavy enough to still the twitch of a limb. Underneath, a rope lattice crossed the frame, tightened with a wooden key each evening. Hence the phrase still whispered centuries later, "Sleep tight." Children played beneath while parents slept above, the ropes dripping dust like snow. Mice scurried through straw in the walls, an orchestra of tiny feet marking the hours. To those accustomed to silence, it was maddening. To those born in castles, it was the heartbeat of home. Candles were the hourglass of the night. A tall tallow candle might last 4 hours, beeswax twice that if you were rich. People measured dreams by the melting of wax. When the wick guttered, someone rose to trim it, a soft hiss, a whiff of honey smoke, and the cycle of wakefulness began again. Light meant safety. Darkness meant surrender. So many left a single flame burning through the coldest hours, its reflection quivering in the polished breastplate hung on the wall. That shimmer looked almost alive, like a guardian spirit keeping watch until dawn. And still, warmth was not only physical. When the cold crept too close, people told stories of saints who slept on bare stone and awoke surrounded by angels, of peasants visited by fire sprites who rekindled their hearths, of a winter so cruel that the Virgin herself walked the hills, spreading quilts of snow to hide the dead until spring. The mind makes heat where the body cannot. Words are another kind of flame. Wind sighs through arrow slits. A coal shifts in the hearth with a hollow pop. Far away, one bell tolls, its echo dissolving into stone. Midnight in a medieval castle was not darkness, it was texture. The air itself felt woven, threads of smoke, breath and moonlight tangled together in the stillness. Most fires had sunken to red eyes beneath ash. The corridors exhaled cold. You could taste iron and dust on your tongue. A single candle burned in the Lord's chamber, its flame bent toward the draught that forever haunted the walls. Beyond that glow, everything blurred into the grey of half-sleep, the moment when sight stops insisting on being awake. The castle at night was a living creature. The timbers creaked as if sighing. Flags at the tower tops whispered like lungs. Even the moat murmured softly where water licked the frozen stones. No one ever truly conquered night here. They negotiated with it. Leather soles scrape faintly along battlements. High above, the guards walked their rounds, silhouettes against a milky sky. Each carried a small lantern and a prayer muttered between chattering teeth. They were the only ones allowed to speak aloud, though even they kept their words small, as if the dark were listening. Below them, in the chapel, monks prepared for matins, the first prayers after midnight. The sound of their chants climbed the stairwells like warm air rising, low Latin syllables rolling through arches, a pulse older than war or kings. Their voices never broke the hush. They shaped it, gave it meaning. In the candle haze, frost glittered on stone columns like powdered glass. Outside, snow began to fall, silent, relentless. Each flake landed on the roof like a second of forgotten time. Not everyone slept straight through the night. People woke naturally between two slumbers. The first ended around midnight. The second began an hour or two later. That in-between hour was the castle's secret life. A servant might rise to check the coals, whispering a charm learned from her grandmother. "Stay warm, old heart. Stay tame." A noblewoman, restless from a dream, might pace her chamber, cloak drawn tight, fingertips brushing the chill of the wall as if tracing its veins. In the kitchen, someone stole a bite of cold bread, chewing slowly so as not to wake the hounds. It was a time of small trespasses and soft forgiveness. No one belonged wholly to sleep or waking. They floated between. Some wrote letters by the light of a stub candle. Others simply sat and listened, to the crackle of ice on windows, to mice scratching stories through the straw. Each sound was proof that life still moved within the frozen stone. From the upper windows the world looked endless and pale. Constellations shimmered like embers scattered across a velvet cloth. The people below read the heavens the way we read clocks. They believed certain stars governed warmth, others guarded dreams. When the dog star rose bright and clear, it was said even wolves dared not howl. The sky itself was standing watch. A comet, though rare, would send whispers through every corridor, a sign of God's anger, or perhaps his torch guiding lost souls home. In the quiet hours, the cosmos felt near enough to touch. Sometimes a monk would pause mid-chant, breath visible, eyes lifted toward the oculus high above the altar. In that gaze lived both science and faith, though they had no word for the difference. Religion gave order to the night, but superstition filled its shadows. A cross was carved into the lintel of every door, yet beside it hung sprigs of herbs or bits of iron to ward off sprites. They prayed to saints for warmth, and to nameless things for mercy. Before extinguishing candles, families murmured, "Guard this flame in sleep, lest darkness forget us." Some households left a bowl of milk near the hearth for the hearth mother, hoping she'd keep the embers alive. Others drew protective circles in chalk around the bedposts. Belief was layered, like blankets, one divine, one human, one purely hopeful. The night tolerated all of it. Faith, fear, and fatigue were indistinguishable in the dark. Back in the chambers, families keep their own rituals. They cross themselves before the brazier, trace the sign of a little house over the hearth, roof, wall, door, then whisper a promise to treat fire like a guest, welcomed, watched, and never trusted, alone. Children repeat prayers by halves, eyelids drooping, words slurring into dream. Bless this bed, this blanket, this breath. On a small stool sits a bowl of water where ice is filmed thin as glass. Someone cracks it with a fingertip to prove the world still moves. A father ties his daughter's woolen cap under her chin, not sure and gentle. A grandmother tucks a hot stone wrapped in cloth at the foot of the bed. The stone clicks softly against wood, like a heart learning a steady beat. In the loft above the animals, a farmhand rests his palm on a horse's shoulder. He whispers a psalm to the rhythm of the horse's slow, generous breath. The animal does not know Latin, only trust. It is fluent enough. Candles gutter, a thin hiss. Somewhere iron rings against iron. Not all prayers use words. Some are made of things. By the door hangs a sprig of rowan, red berries now shriveled to little beads of flame. It stands watch against the unseen cold. The kind that steals not just heat, but courage. A pin of iron lies under the mattress, because iron remembers the forge and frightens wandering spirits. By the window, a small pouch of salt rests like a pale star. Salt keeps rot at bay, and so, people hope, keeps sorrow from lingering. Across the bed frame, chalk lines mark a fragile geometry. Circles, crosses, a sun. The child drew them at dusk, no one scrubbed them away. They are ridiculous and necessary. On the hearth, a saucer with 3 crumbs of bread and a wick end. An offering for the old house spirit, the way a traveller leaves a coin at a crossroads just in case the road is listening. Do these things work? Perhaps the better question is, what do they prevent? A night without them would feel colder even if the brazier burned the same. A door creaks, fabric shivers, then stillness returns. In one chamber, a boy sits awake, not from fear, but from habit. His job is to watch the flame. He has a small iron spoon for shifting coals and a blanket that smells of smoke and soap. Sometimes he nods off and wakes certain he heard footsteps. Sometimes he truly does. Tonight, a figure passes the threshold. A maid with a pail, hair knotted, eyes half closed. She checks the shutter latch, tests the wall for damp, and leaves without a word. Between them, a language older than speech. Is everything safe? Yes. The boy returns to his station. He pushes a coal. It glows, then dims, like a thought remembered and forgotten in the same breath. In a carved chest beneath a noble's bed lies a small manuscript, copied by an uncle who learned letters in a monastery. It is a book about dreams and their meanings. If you dream of fire that warms without smoke, it means grace. If you dream of snow falling indoors, a guest will come whose news will change the household. If you dream that your breath fogs the mirror and will not clear, beware a promise you made lightly. The book gives confidence to uncertainty. People turn to it the way we turn to weather, not to control, but to prepare. A lady leafs through its pages now, the candle painting gold along the edges. She's not credulous, only human. She wants the night to be a message, not an accident. In the scullery a pot clinks softly, a ghost of labour in a world pretending to sleep. A broom leans like a spear against the door. The stones are wet where someone washed them an hour ago, steam long gone, clean scent lingering. The kitchen girl on the settle pulls the blanket to her ear and recites a litany of tasks for dawn. Fetch water, rake coals, slice yesterday's bread, stir pottage, listen for the bell. She falls asleep halfway through and dreams she's lifting a loaf light as air. In the armoury, a man fingers a dent in his helm and remembers the blow that made it. He is not afraid of battle, only of the cold that slows his hands when he needs them most. He mutters a soldier's charm, may my breath be smoke to frighten fear. Ridiculous again, necessary again. And for those who wake and worry about the weather, the harvest, a loved one on the road, it helps to imagine a map of flames stitched across the castle, each room a tiny star, each star a person, each person a promise. In the chambers, in the kitchens, in the stables, people exhale together. Someone tucks the hot stone deeper into covers. Someone loosens a prayer from their fist and lets it float towards sleep. Dreams were not leisure, they were correspondence. To medieval minds, night opened a mail route between the earthly and the divine. Every breath taken in sleep was a small message sent upward, every dream a reply. So people entered sleep the way a traveller approached a border, slowly, respectfully leaving tokens behind, a kiss to a crucifix, a whisper to a saint, a hand laid briefly on the wall, as if knocking politely before entering another world. The candle sighs. Darkness folds like a cloak. Somewhere in the keep, a young knight turns in his sleep. He dreams he's still in armour, crossing a frozen field where the grass rings like glass. Ahead, a tent glows red, its fire invisible but its heat enormous. Inside sits a figure sharpening a sword made of light. When he wakes, his hands are warm. He believes he has seen St. George, patron of soldiers, reminding him that courage can be kind. He rises, writes the vision in charcoal on a scrap of parchment, and hides it under his pillow. A private contract with heaven. The nun's dream. In the chapel's side cell, a woman in a grey habit dozes upright. She dreams she is a candle, her body the wax, her soul the flame. Wax melts, flame endures. Simple theology, perfect imagery. When she wakes, dawn's first blue leaks through the stained glass. Her blanket is stiff with frost, but she feels heat in her chest like summer. She crosses herself and thanks God for reminding her that even in stillness she burns for a purpose. In the servants' loft, a child sleeps beside the kitchen wall. She dreams she's walking through snow that hums like a lullaby. Each footprint fills instantly with warm water. Frogs leap from it and vanish. She laughs in her sleep. In the morning, she tells the cook, who nods wisely and says it means plenty of rain come spring. The girl believes her. Belief is the most powerful kind of warmth. Every building breathes. Between midnight and morning, the castle exhales cold and inhales warmth. Doors swell, beams contract, mortar sighs. People once thought those noises were angels patrolling the halls. It is a comforting error, no one corrects it. Deep creak, like timbers stretching, a gentle gust through straw. A servant turns over and murmurs, "Easy now, old house." The castle settles, pleased to be acknowledged. There is a moment, perhaps 2:30, when time itself slows. Candles shrink, their flames seem heavier, even thoughts move as if through snow. This is the thin hour, when sleep reaches its deepest colour. If someone wakes then, the world feels slightly transparent. Shadows hesitate before moving. The mind mistakes memory for prophecy. Medieval writers warned against looking in mirrors at this hour. The reflection might answer a bag. Few mirrors existed anyway, and fewer were clean enough to tempt curiosity. The warning lived longer than the object. The philosophy of the cold wind finds the old mortar and hums a thin song. Somewhere a shutter taps once, like a knuckle at a door. Cold clarifies. It peels luxury from need and leaves the human shape honest. A bed is no throne. It is an ark built nightly against a weathered sea. A blanket is not fashion. It is a vow. To medieval minds, winter was not an enemy to be defeated, but a teacher of patience. Wait for spring. Of prudence. Bank your fire. Of company. Share your heat. Rich and poor learned the same alphabet of survival, though they wrote different sentences with it. The Lord wrote with wood and wool, the servant with straw and breath. Both read the same book of dawn. In the barn, animals drowse, their breath braiding in the cold. In the barracks, a chorus of snores like soft saws working timber. In the kitchen, a last ember threads a red seam through grey ash. Heat organises itself into little republics throughout the night. Here, a child under a quilt with a hot stone dreaming of summer rivers. There, two old men sharing a cloak on the watch bench, telling a story for the 1000th time because it keeps hands warm to move the mouth. Father, a maid and her sister sleeping end to end on a pallet, their toes meeting halfway like a treaty. None of it is spectacular. All of it is civilization. Beneath every great hall lay another world. Narrow, low-roofed, warm with human breath and kitchen smoke. Here the servants slept. Cooks, scullions, maids, messengers, the boy who rang the bell. They did not have feather beds or curtained frames. They slept where labour left them, by ovens beneath tables or along the stable wall where the animals breathed steady heat into the straw. A kitchen fire never truly died. Long after midnight, red eyes of coal blinked through ash. A girl curled nearby would draw her knees tight, one side of her face glowing orange, the other blue with frost. She dreamed of bread rising in the morning light. Above her, the lords dreamed of glory. Below, the servants dreamed simply of another dawn. Even asleep, servants listened. If the master called, if the hounds barked, if a rider arrived at the gate, someone had to wake instantly. They learned to balance exhaustion and readiness like two sides of a coin. Each carried a small personal charm against the cold, a scrap of fur, a dried sprig of rosemary, sometimes a pebble warmed in the hearth and slipped into a pocket. Tiny relics of heat, like secret promises. When morning neared, the first to rise were the kitchen hands. They stirred embers with long irons, coaxing orange veins back to life. The castle's day began in those sparks. Up on the battlements, warmth was a rumour. Guards paced the parapets, wrapped in cloaks stiff with frost. Their breath plumed against the starlight, briefly visible, proof of existence, before the wind tore it away. To stay awake, they stamped their feet, whispered verses, or shared crude jokes. One might carry a flask of ale frozen at the neck. They were the castle's sleepless eyes, watching a world that rarely moved. Sometimes a shooting star passed, so bright it cast shadows on the snow below. They said each star was a soul slipping out of purgatory, and the guard would bow his head, letting that brief light warm him more than the fire ever could. In winter, beasts were fellow tenants. Horses steamed in their stalls, cows shifted heavily, chickens slept under benches. Their warmth seeped upward through the floors. It was common for stables to adjoin living quarters. sharing breath through timber walls. Children born in castles learned to tell temperature by the smell of hay. If it was sweet, the air was mild. If acrid and wet, snow was coming. When a calf was born on a freezing night, the stable boy might cradle it beside him under a cloak, whispering nonsense until both slept. In that moment, hierarchy vanished, creature and human equally grateful for heat. Most of the world slept together. A family of 6 could share one mattress, heads alternating with feet to save space. There was no embarrassment, only necessity. They spoke quietly before sleep, short prayers, gossip from the kitchens, or fragments of tales passed down so many winters they had lost their beginnings. Every castle was a library of spoken stories whispered into straw. Long ago, they said, the frost itself was a spirit that crept through keyholes looking for loneliness. So keep someone close, and it will pass you by. So they did. The cold feared company. When all noble fires had dimmed, servants sometimes stole a moment for themselves. They sat near the embers and stared without speaking. For those few minutes they were not invisible. They were simply human beings thawing from the day. One might hum a tune learned from a travelling minstrel. Another mended a torn sleeve by candle end. A third wrote initials in soot on the wall, tiny graffiti no historian would ever record. Then, one by one, they returned to their corners and dreams. Despite rank, despite hunger, there was quiet kindness in shared adversity. A maid slipping an extra log into a guard's brazier. A cook leaving crusts for the boy who scrubbed pots. A soldier lending his cloak to a messenger lost in the snow. Small mercies were the real architecture of survival. Stone built the castle, compassion kept it standing. Somewhere between dream and morning the world stirs again. Medieval people called it the second sleep, a gentler, deeper descent after the midnight hour of prayer. Bodies curl tighter. The air inside the curtained beds grows warm with shared breath. In that dark cocoon, time seems suspended. The mind drifts to half-formed images. Summer markets, green fields, a memory of sunlight that feels like prophecy. Outside, the castle walls glisten with frost. Moonlight paints silver veins along every parapet, each stone sparkling as if dusted with diamonds. Cold may own the land, but within these draperies warmth has conquered one small kingdom. Stone remembers. Every wall in this fortress holds whispers of past winters. If you could listen closely enough, you'd hear the sigh of masons, the laughter of scullery girls, the distant whinny of a horse long turned to dust. At night, the castle dreams alongside its occupants. It dreams of the sun it once absorbed, of fires it sheltered, of lovers who carved initials into its lintels. Its heartbeat is the slow expansion and contraction of stone under cold. Perhaps that's why the walls groan. It's not ghosts, just memory stretching its arms. And if ghosts do walk, they are tender ones. They tuck blankets tighter, adjust curtains, make sure candles don't fall. They have learned what it means to guard warmth. Not all nights were lonely. Beneath the silence bloomed 1,000 quiet affections. A squire sneaking to his beloved's chamber, careful not to rattle the armour hung along the wall. A lady pressing a small letter into a servant's hand with whispered instructions, "Deliver at dawn." Sometimes they met only in dreams. Love was another fire, dangerous but irresistible. Its warmth lingered even after heartbreak, illuminating corridors the sun never reached. The poets of the age wrote that true passion was like candlelight in winter. It could be blown out, yet the smell of wax remained to remind you it was real. Every castle had its stories told in that half-awake hour. Some said Jack Frost himself was a wandering monk punished for pride, doomed to test every window for weakness. Others spoke of the Hearth Mother, a spirit who blessed those who thank their fire before sleeping. In some Slavic keeps, it was the Domovoi, a tiny guardian who slept in the ashes and growled if the coals were left to die. Whether they believed or not, people greeted these tales like company. Myth was insulation for the mind. It wrapped fear in wonder and let them rest beneath it. The horizon blushes. Faint orange creeps through arrow slits, catching on motes of dust that dance like new spirits. Someone stirs, coughs, pulls back the curtain. The chamber smells of wool, smoke, and sleep. A servant enters with the jug of water frozen thin at the lip. They kneel, blow on the coals, and life resumes with a small victorious crackle. Outside, rooks lift from the battlements. The moat reflects the first shimmer of day. For a moment the world is quiet enough that you can almost hear the collective exhale of everyone inside, a chorus of gratitude for surviving another night of medieval winter. They built castles to keep the world at bay, but every night reminded them they were still part of it. The cold, the dark, the fragile warmth of shared breath. These were the real battlegrounds of the Middle Ages, and yet they endured. Not through might or wealth alone, but through the simple miracle of staying close. The lesson lingers even now. Warmth is not given, it's made, together. So close your eyes. The fire may fade, but morning always comes. Sleep as they once slept, under stone, under story, under the patient watch of time.